This is arguably the most difficult interview in history. When the candidates received the exam paper, they were all stunned, because the paper was completely blank. There was nothing written on it. The candidates were confused but dared not speak up. Before the exam began, the examiner announced 3 strict rules. No talking to the examiner or security guards. No leaving the room. No damaging the exam paper. Breaking any of these rules would disqualify you from the exam. And the answer to this interview had only one solution.
Any questions?
After hearing this, no one dared to make a sound, because the first rule of the exam was not to speak to the examiner. After saying that, the examiner started the 80-minute countdown and left the room, staring at the blank paper in front of them. No one knew what to do. They had no idea what the exam questions were. It seemed that getting this $800,000 annual salary job wasn't going to be easy. As time passed, a woman couldn't hold back any longer. She thought the company probably wanted them to write a professional report, so she immediately began to write on the paper, but before she could finish the first sentence, the examiner suddenly walked over and kicked her out of the room. It turned out she had broken the third rule. She had damaged the exam paper. Seeing the woman disqualified for writing, the others quickly put their pens down. Just when everyone was at a loss, David suddenly started laughing. He realized that the examiner had only mentioned 3 rules. As long as they didn't break any of those 3, they wouldn't be disqualified. To test his theory, he directly greeted Jack beside him, because the rules of the exam only prohibited talking to the examiner or security. It didn't say anything about talking to other candidates. Sure enough, the security guard nearby didn't react at all. Seeing that the young man's actions were allowed, the others finally dared to speak, and began discussing why the exam paper was blank. At this point, Anna suddenly stood up. She thought the paper might be made from a special material. Maybe the questions would appear if they shone light on it. Others thought the long-haired woman made a good point, so they also tried shining light on the paper, hoping the questions would appear. But after trying it, the paper didn't change. Then Jason suddenly had an idea. Maybe a special kind of light would make the questions appear. But the room didn't have that kind of light. Just as everyone was feeling disappointed, the blonde woman suddenly noticed that there seemed to be an emergency light on the wall. Maybe that was the light they needed for the paper. To test her theory, Luke immediately broke the emergency light on the wall. Once the room went dark, the emergency light indeed lit up. Excited, they quickly took out the paper to test it, but unfortunately the paper still didn't change after being exposed to the light. Jack thought maybe they hadn't found the right color. There might be other lights in the room. Sure enough, the observant Lisa noticed another light tube on the wall that hadn't been lit. Maybe that light was the one they needed. They quickly smashed the emergency light in the room. To their surprise, an orange light filled the room. But after testing it, the questions on the paper still didn't appear. At this point, there were only 60 minutes left in the exam. Luke guessed the paper must be made of special material. To confirm this, he picked up the previously disqualified woman's paper and scribbled on it. But after testing it, the questions still didn't appear. Even so, Luke wasn't planning to give up. He decided to try using liquid. Then he ripped the paper into 2 halves. One half was given to Jason to test with saliva. The other half was tested with urine. But in the end, the entire paper was destroyed, and the questions still didn't appear. Just then, Jack noticed that there was a man wearing glasses who hadn't moved or said a word the entire time. When everyone approached him, the man said something completely baffling. He had actually revealed the method for making the questions appear on the paper, but the others didn't understand what he meant. At this point, Luke couldn't take it anymore. He felt that the company was just messing with them, luring them to the interview with an $800,000 salary, just toying with them. But Lisa doesn't think so. She had researched the company beforehand and knew they wouldn't do something so pointless. Remembering the examiner's words, the group regained their focus. Since the previous methods didn't work, the secret might lie with the security guard at the door. The rules of the exam said not to talk to the security guard, but it didn't say they couldn't touch the security guard. So to test her hypothesis, Anna slowly moved her hand toward the security guard.